Hi, everybody, and welcome to Backstage. Thank you again for being a part of this, for stopping in to see who our guests are, and for taking advantage of this huge library that you can review time and time again, and particularly share with your students. The name Ron Carter is synonymous with jazz education. From his start at Lincoln High School through Northern Illinois University to the University of North Carolina, Fayetteville, he blazed a trail that has shifted the entire landscape of jazz education. We could spend he's a consummate artist. He's traveled all over the world. And I started to put together a list of names he's played with, but it would be easier to tell you who he hasn't played with along his journey. He is also the founder of the Carter Clinics and festivals, and I know he's going to talk a little bit about that. He's been inducted into the Downbeat Magazine's Hall of Fame for Jazz Educators. He's an author of the Swingin' on the Bars, produced by one of the co-authors, produced by Alfred Publications, and he is also one of the authors for GIA's Teaching Music Through Performance in Jazz, both Volume 1 and Volume 2. And I could take up the rest of this time just highlighting his accolades, but they pale in comparison to what a nice human being he is. And I think that's what you're going to find out when we talk about his students. So tell us what is going on with you, Mr. Carter. What's happening in North Carolina?
Well, I'm just enjoying the breeze. I'm sitting out on my lanai, enjoying the breeze, listening to the birds, and just chillaxing since my 2 jazz festivals we just completed. So,
just tell us while we're on that. Tell us about, because this is phenomenal what you did.
Yeah, during this COVID time, a lot of I thought about the thousands of students I taught over the last 50 years, and them having an opportunity to make some finance during this time. So we started doing lessons, and then we came with an idea about doing virtual jazz festivals, and we actually ended up doing one for Georgetown, Texas, near Austin, and then we did our own Carter's Jazz Clinics, our virtual jazz festival, which both involved over 40 groups. And involved schools from all over the world, actually.
It's phenomenal. And you told me you're adding a whole educational wing to the clinics and so forth. Tell us about that. What are you going to do? How are you going to expand that?
We're going to expand that by we have an artist wing, of course, of artists who are out on the road so much they don't have time to do as much teaching, but they can come in and teach if somebody want to do a big concert or whatever with some of our big artists. But also we have educators that I've worked with over the last 45 to 50 years that know what we call the Carter concept of pass on this music to the next generation. And that involves, I've hired 21 of my former students at this point in time and planning on adding, and that's all over the world, all the way from Brazil to Colombia, all over the United States and Canada, and adding more artists and clinicians for going out teaching since COVID has given us a break, doing that in September.
Phenomenal. You have to share this with everybody. When you came out of getting your graduate degree at the University of Illinois and your first job that you inherited, what did you inherit at Lincoln High School when you took the first job?
Well, I guess the first thing I can say is that after I finished my master's degree, which I did in 1 year at the University of Illinois, I ended up having 3 job offers. And one of the job offers was in Flint, Michigan. Another one somewhere else in the country. But I wanted to go back to my roots, which means, I'd integrated the high schools in South Georgia in the 60s. And so that was a tumultuous time during that time. And I was basically just wanted to go back to my roots, like, teaching and whatever, in a place where I had more people of color. And so what I did, I took the job in East St. Louis, Illinois. And I was told that I'd be inheriting, I also knew it's the high school Miles Davis went to, but I had no idea that the high school, they tried to close the high school, and it ended up going down to about 700 students. And the band had about 14 to 15 students in the band. And when I got there, they just had instruments almost like in a teepee of just broken instruments, and they promised they were going to get new instruments. And we did finally get some new instruments, but I ended up having to raise money to get some really good instruments.
So I know that what you did in 3 years was I mean, it's like magic dust. Tell us what happened from that first year. And didn't you say you had like 3 marching French horns that were in that first group?
Yeah, almost 3 turtle doves. But no, I had I had I had one trombone player. In fact, he was a great trombone player. He ended up making, by his senior year, he made All-State, the Illinois All-State on trombone. But I ended up with 1 trombone player and 3 marching French horns. And that was my trombone section. I just rearranged all the parts to make it work. My guitar player was when a kid came in with an instrument that had 3 strings on it, a guitar. So I said, "You're my bass player." So I went out and bought electric bass, and I put him on bass, and taught him how to play bass, and then I had to write arrangements. My first real arrangement for the band was Miles Davis Walking. You know, so I arranged that for the band, and in just 3 months we actually played for a gig at on campus of Lincoln High School. And for guys that don't know, East St. Louis Lincoln High School is the high school Miles Davis attended. Also, great vocalist Leon Thomas. Also, Jackie Joyner, Al Joyner. I mean, so just so many great athletes and came out of the high school. So trying to get the music program recognized after those many years Miles had left, you know, was not an easy task. And so we had to start with what we had.
So where were you in 3 years from the time you inherited 15 or 16 kids?
Well, in 3 years, we actually, the kids could actually see the St. Louis Arch from the side of the school. But most of the kids had never even been to St. Louis, and never had been to Chicago or to the Arch or anything like that. And so in 3 years, I took the group to Europe. We toured the jazz band. We made our first recording in 2.5 years, and then we went to Europe that next summer and took the concert and marching band to Europe.
How many did you have by the end of 3 years in the program, Ron?
We had about 75, and then we ended up having about over 100 in the program, the marching band, the old time marching band, and ended up with two jazz bands, and had a arranging class, a classical piano class. I taught jazz arranging in the morning at 6 in the morning, and I taught and all the kids learned how to write for the marching band, and all my students studied classical piano, and all of them arranged.
No. So when people say one person can't make a difference, that's not true, is it?
No, if it was about money, because I would say one of the statements my mom used to say, we didn't have a pot to do something in and a window to throw it out of. Yeah. You probably heard that before. But anyway,
yeah, I have.
We were in that situation where there was very little economic. In fact, it was minority, about 99% minority. And most of my kids were from single family homes, probably 80 to 85% were.
So you get the revenue like to go to Europe and so forth by fundraising and sponsorship, and how did that work?
Selling candy, selling oranges, asked for donations. And believe it or not, after I was there 12 years, one of our sponsors was Anheuser-Busch. One of our sponsors was Ralston Purina. And after my 8th year, we started doing it had grown so much till we started doing a concert over in St. Louis. It was called the Radisson. It was a round hotel. Now you can see it when the Cardinals are coming, the big round building. Mm-hmm. It's changed names now, but it's the big round. I went over and asked, I said, what are you doing on Sundays? They say nothing. I said, what about if I get you some people in here? We'll buy a meal from you. You know, we can afford to pay $15 to $20 for a meal, and you give us the place free. And I'll let you set a bar up. So they let me do it. So we started doing a dinner concert. And we had artists coming in like Ellis Marcellus and Bob Minster. We had all kind of artists come in and play with the high school jazz. Slide Hampton. A lot of folks came and played with the high school band.
I mean, when you drop names like that, I go like, how did you get them to do it? I mean,
well, once I started the program, anybody that came to St. Louis wanted to come over to East St. Louis Lincoln High School and see the program. And so, I mean, from Eddie Harris doing a clinic, and believe it or not, the only time my principal ever came to the band room is when I had Bo Diddley was there doing the Blues and Jazz Heritage Festival. Bo Diddley came in, and my principal came around to take a picture of Bo Diddley. Bo Diddley did a blues clinic for my students. But we had all kind of artists come in. And even when I met Wynton came to St. Louis. He was on tour with the Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. Mm-hmm. And I knew, and Bobby Watson was the music director, and I knew Bobby. And I said, I told my students, we're going over to see Art Blakey because we played I transcribed some of Art Blakey's, charts. We went over to see Art Blakey. And so this young trumpet player was playing with him, and he could play. And he wasn't Wynton, then he was Wynton Marsalis. Young Wynton, and we were talking backstage at Jazz Lincoln Center. He said, Ron, I was 18 years old. And so we stood back. So we met all the guys in the band. And the other band director, Michael Dupart, he's gone on to heaven now, but Michael Dupart is from New Orleans. And so we hooked up, made friends, and said, what are you guys doing during the daytime? He said, nothing. I said, why don't you come over during the day and work with my high school band? And I said, we can't afford to pay you, but we can get you some lunch. I can send one of my parents to pick you up and get you lunch. So we went over to the Rice house and got some rice. It was right across the street from the school. And he ate it out the box.
Love it. I love it.
And that was the first time that I became friends with Wynton Marsalis. And we created a friendship that's lasted now for ever since he was 18. I think he's in his 50s now. So it's been a long time. And he came over and I said, why don't you take my trumpet players over to the piano lab? We had a full piano lab. Mm-hmm. And he went over and he said, what to do, bruh? What to tell him, bruh? I said, he didn't talk about jazz. He talked about playing trumpet. I remember him talking about not using pressure and how he was able to hold the trumpet loosely and be able to play the range of the instrument. And so it was great. And every time he came back to town, he would come and we'd do jam sessions for 3 and 4 hours.
Oh my God.
With Eric Reed or Marcus Roberts or Wycliffe Gordon or whoever was playing with the group at that time.
Oh, they were spoiled with gushing talent all around them. That's unbelievable. So you stayed there like what, 18 years, 17, 18 years?
17 and a half years.
Okay. And then keep going, Northern Illinois. Tell us about that.
Then I went on to Northern Illinois University and I knew I'd worked at Birch Creek. I helped started a jazz camp at Birch Creek, Wisconsin. And in fact, we had the entire Woody Herman band there for a whole week. And so I had a chance to hang out with Woody Herman, and we even took, believe it or not, took an old outhouse, and they, of course, it wasn't being used anymore, but they fixed it up, and it was called Woody's Shed. And Woody would go out there and practice, and that's when you hear clarinet just whipping out of the formerly outhouse. But we had our concerts in a barn in Birch Creek, Wisconsin. And so I spent so much time there, and that's where I met Steve Duke. Mm-hmm. And every time Steve Duke was a great saxophone player, great saxophone teacher at Northern Illinois University. And also every time my band played at Midwest, my high school jazz band, we'd go over and hear the Northern Illinois University Jazz Ensemble play with Ron Modell. Mm-hmm. And soon Ron was going to retire in 2 years. And Steve Duke recommended me, and Ron recommended me to take the position. And so I kept saying no because I didn't want to leave East St. Louis. And I kept taking the salary up and up and up. And they kept going up and up and up. And so it ended up where everybody in the School of Music got a 7% raise just because I came in. So I said, and I was a full, but I signed an agreement where I can apply for full professorship in just 3 years. And so in 3 years, I was the only minority full professor at Northern Illinois University for 10 years.
Oh my God. And
that's when I started expanding the artists we're bringing in and more well-known artists, coming in with the band. And what we do, we go out and we do the guest artists would come in. I increased the salary of what I was paying the artist. And the schools would pay us for $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 to come out and do a concert and do the clinic and workshop. And we did concert halls in Crystal Lake in Chicago and different places. And so we had everybody coming you can think of, people like Tito Puente would tour with us, Harold Jones, Ed Thigpen, Lewis Nash, Herlin Riley, Victor Lewis, Louis Belson, Steve Teray, Slide Hampton, Curtis Keto, James Moody, Frank Foster, Donald Harrison, Harriet Blewett, Tia Fuller, Charles McPherson, Wynton Marsalis, Russell Gunn, Randy Brecker, Claudio Uditi, Clark Terry, John Faddis, John Clayton, Roddy Whitaker. The list goes on and on.
Those kids got a PhD in jazz education by just being around those folks.
Well, that's really how I learned. You know, I went to Bethune-Cookman University,
Huh?
undergrad school. I played in the marching band. I got there. I was a section leader. I'm a classical trained clarinetist. So all my degrees are in clarinet, not in saxophone, and not in jazz. It's in music education. So both of my degrees from Bethune-Cookman and from University of Illinois were in music education. And I was an all-state clarinet player in the state of Georgia. So, but I actually never studied saxophone. I always studied classical clarinet, Weber, Mozart, Brahms, Von Williams. That's what I studied. In fact, I thought I was going to be a classical clarinet player in some orchestra, you know, but I noticed when I saw the St. Louis Symphony, Chicago Symphony, I didn't see anybody look like me. In fact, nobody even had a freckle. So I figured I better look other cases. So when I was off the job in East St. Louis, the job was including starting a jazz program. So it was, wow. I said, well, I can do this. And so I'd been playing rhythm and blues my whole life. I started playing professionally rhythm and blues at 14 years old.
Wow.
And so I've been transcribing those things my whole life and playing the blues and those kind of things. So all I did was start, I played in the high school jazz band for a while, played at Bethune-Cookman, the jazz band, played, believe it or not, University of Illinois, I played in the African High Life group with Dr. Oscar Suleiman. And we played West African music from West Africa. And that's why I got into studying Ed Thigpen. That was part of my teaching, because Dr. Suleiman, who's artist in residence at the University of Illinois in Chicago, and he could write without a piano. He could write charts, and he never put a time signature. And we just knew what it was, compound meter or complex meter, whatever, a polyrhythm, by how he subdivided the rhythms. So we knew if it was dooch dooch doo dooch dooch or dooch how he started the beat off. And so we just African High Life music, which is basically a mixture of West African music and American jazz and American dance, rhythm and blues. And so that was the music they danced to. And it was in drums, and he played the wooden flute from the end, not from the faceplate, but from the very end. So it was, and he had all kind of drums, and it was just, that was an experience. In fact, when I started in East St. Louis, he came and wrote charts for my high school band. In fact, I've been trying to find recordings where we recorded with him.
Yeah.
And I think a guy who used to do our engineering, Earl Allen, might have some. And I finally connected with his son. And his son is a great drummer, travels all over the world. And in fact, his nickname is Weedy. And I can't think of his real name, but anyway, and Oscar always told me that, you know, they believe in God. They don't call God goddess, but he said he was told that he's going to meet someone and he was going to have a son and he would be noble. And his son is a great musician. Wow. He plays African drums all over the world. Weedy, W-E-D-I-E, he's a fantastic musician.
So how long were you at Northern before you, quote,
I was at Northern.
Retired?
I retired after 21 years, but I stayed on I started after 22 years and I stayed on for another year, just because, and took part of my salary just to help them, you know, get someone in place. And I was fortunate enough, I didn't want the same thing to happen. When I left East St. Louis, the program folded completely. Nobody wanted to take the job because I'd put so much work and time in. And so the program folded, and they eventually closed the high school in just two or 3 years.
Oh my God. And
so I don't want the same thing to happen in Northern. And so I talked to one of my former students who was Professor Reginald Thomas. He's the director of jazz studies at Northern Illinois University now. And so I asked him to apply for the position. At that time, he was one of the lead people at Michigan State University, with Rodney Wilk, who's somebody else I mentored as well. And so I asked Reggie to take the position. He did. He came in and just blew everybody out the water as far as, because he's played with the Basie band, he's recorded, you know, he's did all kind of work. So he's a great musician and a great teacher because he knows the Carter concept.
Got it. So when you said you retired, moved to North Carolina, but that retirement didn't last long, right?
No, I was offered jobs at Elon University, some teaching at Shaw University, and different universities, but it was nothing that offered that made me want to come back to university teaching. But then University of North Carolina, Fayetteville made an offer I could not refuse. You know, they offered me they offered me, ungodly amount to come in for 1 day a week and to start a jazz festival, to start, a combo and those kind of things at the university. And met some great students. In fact, one of my former students from there, I was able to get him a scholarship to go to Northern Illinois University on French horn and for his master's. And he plays jazz on the French horn.
Whoa.
On the concert French horn. So, he's a Brian Flippin, a great musician, very talented, drum major in the marching band at Fayetteville State University. Great musician, but he'll be starting his master's there in the fall.
So how long did you stay at UNC Fayetteville?
I was UNC Fayetteville. I was there just 3 years.
Okay.
Because I took a 3-year appointment, and it was just so different. I mean, administrative support and those kind of things, it was just not even comparable to Northern Illinois University. And I love the job, I love the students, but a lot of other things I couldn't deal with professionally. So,
second retirement. Now, you didn't retire, you refired. So what have you been what have you been doing since then? Because you're busier now than ever.
Well, for about 5 or 6 years, I was just going out doing clinics. Carter's Jazz Clinics was just me. Mm-hmm. My son would join me at different times. Brian Carter, who's a great musician from went to Juilliard in New York. But I started, and so Brian would go out when we'd go do an entire week in Seattle, entire week in Fort Lauderdale, working with Dillard and those schools, and we'd do entire week in Georgia, and so we did what we call residencies. Mm-hmm. And when COVID started, I figured I need to employ more of my students. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did. I had a lot of my former students because as we went out and did clinics and workshops, as we toured with Northern Illinois University, we would, the kids would teach, they would do workshops for the students and teach improvisation clinics and those kind of things. And so I've already got schools calling me now, asking me, when am I going to go out again? I told them, I'm going out, but I have plenty of people who know the concept that will be out because I'm not going out as much. I promised my wife I wouldn't be out as much now. So I just make just enough to take her on some nice vacations.
I know this because, as I told you, band directors, they watch this. This is the 90% of the audience that's watching this, Ron, are band directors. Can anybody in any school have a great jazz band?
Anybody who wants to.
That's my man.
And the great thing about it, they don't have to be a great jazz musician to do that. They just have to know the concepts, because anybody who told you they taught you how to play jazz, they're lying. The same way nobody taught us how to speak English or Spanish or Portuguese or Swahili. We learn from listening and become part of the culture of the language. And jazz is the same, regardless of what anybody says. And I thank God I was able to connect with Clark Terry and Ed Thigpen and Miles Davis, and those kind of people and Jimmy Heath when I was young. You were younger, not necessarily younger. And I learned from just asking those guys questions and find out how they learn. Asking Randy Brecker, how did you learn jazz? Asking Miles Davis, how did you learn how to play jazz? And it's the same. Miles didn't say, yeah, Ron, I went to Juilliard and I learned my 3-6-2-5-1s and my Coltrane changes and the rest is history. No, he said, Ron, I spent a lot of time listening. I would listen to Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Bix Beiderbecke, Roy Eldridge, Dizzy Gillespie. But he said, my man was Clark Terry, because Clark dressed real cool, man, and Clark could play, man. And Clark, perfect amateur. And I studied with Clark Terry as well. And Clark Terry is just a great musician and was a great motivator. In fact, Clark hired me to come work with him in his jazz program at the University of Arkansas at Pine Bluff. Yeah. And so I took a sabbatical and I went down and studied with him. And I had a chance to I brought my jazz band down from Northern, and we played with Raw Hargrove and all those folks. Hung out with Raw Hargrove and all those folks for a whole week. And all the great players that played with Basie and they were still living, of course. And I had a chance to play with Clark Terry Big Band, and me and Clark Terry do a scat competition on stage, the Jazz Festival. So You know, and plus I hired Clark Terry to come play with my high school band on several occasions. And he came and toured my college band 4 or 5 times because he's such a great motivator,
Oh,
great influence, you know, in my teaching and in my life as a musician, and his sincerity and his dedication to education. And one thing, Clark, that I always pass my students, if you teach, you should be able to play. And if you play, you should be able to teach.
yeah,
And I always
absolutely.
tell my students, never put your instrument down.
Yeah.
Because
So
you know,
go ahead.
no, that was it.
Uh, so if I'm a band director in somewhere out in the middle of the prairie, and I'm watching this, and I go, well, yeah, is there any way I could get in touch with you to get help?
Well, all people have to do, first of all, just go to www.cartersjazzclinics.com, and myself and my 22 artists will be willing to come out and help you from, we call it from rooter to tutor, from beginners, from beginners to advanced students. And I thank God I've had the opportunity to start programs like the South Shore Youth Jazz Ensemble and starting great musicians like my son, Brian,
Oh,
who was on the Juilliard, Marquise Hill, who won the Monk competition, was a great recording artist as well. At 10 years old, my son was 8. Uh, uh, Kenneth Ashodi, he started my program when he was 10 or 11, and he ended up going to Juilliard and completing Juilliard. Darren Holloway was one of my former students, went on to Juilliard and got a jazz degree from Juilliard. So it's been a lot of students, and Beyonce's music director, instrument director, Chris Johnson, I mean, Wynton's piano player, Dan Nimmer, um, uh, uh, Kanye West's drummer, Charles Haynes. Um, I mean, the list goes on and on. I mean, Montez Coleman was Roy Hargrove for many years, and then went on to play with McCoy Tyner. I mean, so it's,
my God.
so the list goes on and on.
It's a history book. You know, I watched some of Brian's performance tapes and so forth. Is there anything he can't play? Is there anything your son instrument he can't? He was all over. He was singing, he was drumming, he was piano, everything.
Yeah, he does all the arranging, all the production. He does everything. Yeah, he's great with technology. He knows stuff I can only think about. I told him he's a musician that I, wish I was, because he's a great musician. But his first lesson was with when he was I think he was 7 years old. Was with Louis Bellson.
Oh my God.
And then Louis and I hung out at Louis toured my college band. And in fact, Louis Bellson's final concert on this earth was with Northern Illinois University. And he was only supposed to play 2 songs. He ended up playing the whole concert. And it was in his hometown. They honored him back in Davenport, Iowa area. And so it was great. Clark Terry's final full concert was with Northern Illinois University, the Jazz Combo Day. And he's supposed to play 2 songs. I say, he came in a wheelchair. He had somebody with him helping him. I said, Clark just played 2 tunes this song. So they put him a stool on stage, and he's only supposed to play 2 songs. Guess what? He played for 2 hours, nonstop.
A great human. You know, when you talk, and I think again, teachers are watching this. When you talk about Clark Terry and the great person he was, and Louis Bellson and the great person he was, and when I talked to your students, and I had a long conversation with Alyssa the other day, she was so complimentary about all the things she learned from you, and she flipped it immediately and said, "But he made me part of his family." And that's what your students say. There's a huge connection with you that goes far beyond the music itself. Yes?
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's the same thing. You know, with Clark Terry. When I talked to Clark's wife, she said, Ron, Clark really loved you, and he considered you part of the family. And it was. I mean, Clark talked to me, and even Jimmy Heat. Jimmy Heat called me the motivator. What's up, motivator? I talked to Benny Golson a few months ago. His wife is real ill now, and he's not going out much now. But he said, "Man, you still dancing in front of the band?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I don't know I'm dancing, but yes, I am." So, I think it is. I think any teacher that's going to be a real teacher has to make kids feel like their family. And I had a great one of my great bass player who works. In fact, I hired her as part of Carter's Jazz Clinics, Marlene Rosenberg. And we both went to the University of Illinois. but she played with some of everybody. She played with all the great players. And she told me, she said, Ron, you can get in front of a band and tell them they're sucking and they still laughing and having fun. I said, because you don't have to hurt anybody's feelings to motivate them to get better in what they
Yeah.
do. But you also don't have to lie to them and tell them they're great
Right.
when they need your help.
Right.
In my jazz pedagogy course, and that's the stream through all of my textbooks, teaching music performance and jazz. I tell students that you make a comment unless you're able to fix the problem.
Mm.
And so we would
Mm.
take, I don't care if it's the airman a note, Jazz and Lincoln Orchestra, Count Basie Band, the Midwest Band of the North, whatever. Well, I put on CDs of bands and play. I say, we're going to evaluate this band. I want you to tell me what you can do, what's great about the band, but tell me what you can do to improve the band's performance.
Perfect.
Because that's one thing I learned from Dizzy Gillespie. There's no such thing as perfection in jazz. Because you learn until you're no longer on this earth. And so the students were able to, even with the airman note, doesn't make any difference. Jazz Lincoln Orchestra, Count Basie Band, they were always willing to, come up, but you can't make a comment unless you're able to fix it and come up with a solution. And it can't be, you need to put some stank on it or you need to put some groove on it. That means nothing. It has to be something substantive that can be applied effectively.
Right. Well, it's interesting because people will say, I graduated from Indiana University. I'm a Michigan State person. Your students say I'm a Ron Carter student. They identify with you more than even the school.
Well, I tell students that all the time, because everybody wondered, was when I started Northern in '94, I was told, even by some of the professors there, you'll never be able to build a jazz program here, because we had about, I think it was 11 jazz majors. And in 3 years, we had 75 jazz majors. And I found out that was too many, so I had to cut it back down to about 50, between 50 and 60. But I told them that the scape is changing. And that started in the 80s, mid 80s. And that's when I started doing more and more work with Clark Terry. He said, man, if you can't teach, it's going to be very difficult eventually, unless you can pass this on to the next generation. And so when I started South Shore Youth Jazz Ensemble, I talked to all those great players in Chicago. Some of them played in the Ellington Band, some of them played in the Basie Band, this steakhouse called Alexander's. And I would take my South Shore kids over there, and the guys wouldn't let them sit and let me sit in. I'd say, if you guys don't pass it in, the music's gonna die. This music is communal music. It came through the African tradition. It's communal. And so I said, you gotta let these kids sit in. So they started letting the kids sit in. And the same thing had to happen when Russell Gunn, who was one of my former students, played with Winton in the Jazz Lincoln Orchestra, won all those different awards, played with Branford Marsalis for many years, nominated for many Grammys and all kind of awards. Big Band Album of the Year this year at Grammys. But when he got to New York, he said, Mr. Carter, they're not doing jam sessions anymore. I said, well, that's your job to start it up. So he started, they got that community got together and started doing more jam sessions. And I did the same thing in East St. Louis. I went to this restaurant and said, just give me 2 hours where you don't serve drinks. And let me come in and bring the kids in. Then the parents will stay after the kids leave.
Oh, yeah.
And so we started jam sessions. Same thing when Terrell Staff and I started the Jazz Lincoln Center Essential Elder competition in Perth, Australia. We told the students there, they said, well, we can't get nobody to come out, blah, blah, blah. I say, start doing a jam session. Go to a restaurant and tell them, just give us a sandwich or something. And we'll come in and play for 2 hours. And we'll bring in musicians from the Western Australian WAPA, from the conservatory, to play. And so once you build an audience, then you can charge them. And I did the same thing in Northern. We went to La Salsa. It was no jam session in DeKalb, Illinois. And so we went to La Salsa and said, can we do something here? Just give us a taco or something at the end of the night. And the grown folks a little beer, bam, bam, margarita, whatever. And so we started a jam session. Kids started coming out. And as soon as they got to the point where they were afraid to come out, then I started convincing them. Because I started there were no minorities in the program, maybe one or two out of 300 music majors. That's marching band, music education. There was two, one in vocal and one in instrumental in the entire School of Music. So my thing was, you in Rockford is 51% minority, and Chicago is 48% minority, and you have no minorities in your program. And so my first charge was to start going to high schools that had minority population. And next thing too was get my kids, kids were afraid to go to Chicago, to the Apartment Lounge, and hear all those great jazz musicians who were part of the Basie, Ellington, play with Miles. They were afraid to go to Chicago. But I finally got some minority students that I brought in from St. Louis, and I went to black college and university and recruited students. And then all the students started going to Chicago. They started playing the salsa bands and going to all the jam sessions. In fact, one of my former students, Rich Moore, started playing the salsa band. And they actually won Salsa Band of the Year. And he's never been to Puerto Rico or anywhere, but he learned the culture from hanging with the people and playing the music. Sure. And now he's a great clarinetist, a great jazz saxophonist, and plays all over the world now. I mean, so it's, and I have so many students that same story goes from me getting an opportunity to go to Puerto Rico, and with the event of Facebook, I was able to recruit all over the world. So I had students coming in. When I left in 1994, my pianist was from South Korea, Mariana Kim. Guess what? She writes books for Hal Leonard, but guess what kind of books she writes? Gospel music books. Wow. On teaching gospel music and playing gospel music. Okay, that's what she does. She studied with the great Willie Pickens, my piano teacher in Northern. Wow. And but not only that, but my guitar player was from Japan. And they heard about the program. They saw us playing online. So they came and auditioned and got in my program. You know what I mean? So, and I had players from all over Mexico, all over Canada. I mean, so you can recruit all over the world. And I made it my, I did clinics and workshops at historically black colleges and universities, and intentionally recruited those students to come to Northern to further their education. And now they're playing all over the world. In fact, a student I recruited from Hampton University talked to me 2 weeks ago, said, Mr. Carter, I don't see Northern playing at all these, at schools in the minority population like when you were there. I said, well, it's a different, he's doing a great job, but it has to be of interest to the person that's there to do that. Yeah. And so I said, I made it a conscious effort from being in East St. Louis and seeing very few people of color studying jazz and going into music education. And that's very important that a student in Memphis, Tennessee, a program I started working with 8 years ago. And Dr. Ali Liddell doing a great job. In fact, this band has made Savannah 3 times and won it the last time. And then he's been at St. Johnson the last 2 years, his band. And also a program, Dillard School of Arts, Chris Dorsey, same thing. He uses my textbook as his classroom textbook. And kids have to do assignments out of my teaching music performance in jazz. And he calls it the concept as well, the Carter concept. And what it did, when I talked to Whitney, I said, we have all these programs coming in for St. Johnson, but there's no minorities in the groups. And so we started recruiting. In fact, my old high school, it became East St. Louis High School. I worked with them 2 years, and one of my former students, then they actually made it to New York in just 2 years. I mean, so the concept works, but if you wouldn't have put the time in, bring people in. And I think what a lot of people is that, I tell people all the time, if it were not for Clark Terry, Miles Davis, Wynton, I mean, even I influenced Wynton, but he influenced me a lot as well. And he'll tell you, I was talking to Wynton a few months ago, and he was saying, Ron, I don't care, all these bands, he said, no band can do what your band did in East St. Louis. And he said, man, what you were doing with no budget, and those kids could play. In fact, everybody in my high school band can improvise, everybody, because it was part of the thing. You had to learn the language. And the only way to learn the language is through improvisation. You can't learn the language just by sitting down reading it. It's just like somebody putting a book in front of you, say, okay, you have to be able to be Portuguese next in 2 years. If you don't hear it, you'll be saying Jose,
right.
In Spanish instead of Jose, Jose. I mean, because it's crazy because right now I'm working on with my student from Brazil, great, his name is Julio Kalaman, a great Brazilian guitarist and jazz guitarist. I don't mean good, I mean great, and a great educator. He knows the concept. In fact, he came back to Northern for an extra year just to study under me and play in the jazz ensemble. And I'm working with him to translate my textbooks into Portuguese.
Oh,
And also my student from Bogota, Colombia, same thing. And his name is Alejandro Fernandez Banal. Great, he teaches at two of the conservatories in Bogota, Colombia. He's working on translating to Spanish. And we've even translated our website to Spanish now, the Carter's Jazz Clinics, into Spanish now. I mean, so that's why we had 4 or 5 groups from Central and South America participate in our last CJC Virtual Jazz Festival. And so we're trying to make it international as much as possible. And of course, as soon as COVID, everybody gets the vaccine, well, I'll be able to go back to Europe and back to Canada, and because I did a zillion workshops in Calgary and Winnipeg, Manitoba. I mean, it's all over Canada and all over. We're already scheduling a teaching, mentoring, and playing a tour in Chiapas, Mexico, because one of my former students started the first jazz band there. I gave him charge from the Centralton, and the rest is history. He has a great group there.
Love it. Well, I want to go deeper into this, but we're out of time. But I want to ask you one more question, because this is just seeing what one person could do, and you certainly aren't letting any grass grow under your feet or anywhere near your feet for that matter. What advice, Ron, would you have for all those directors out here who've been through a most unusual year, right? What would you like to tell them as they head back where their students are actually in the classroom, rehearsal room with them?
The first thing I would say is, first of all, everything I've done has not been by myself. I mean, it's been a community of people who saw that I was willing to ask them to come in, asking Bo Diddley to come in, asking Bob Minter to come in, asking Clark Terry to come in, and Eddie Henderson. I mean, so it's just a matter of asking people, and if they see you're interested, I haven't met a jazz musician yet that don't want to pass it on. A lot of them don't know how to pass it on because they really haven't really thought about how do I learn to speak this language. I remember sitting down talking to James Moody on many occasions. And he would say things like, well, Ron, you have all the books, all this kind of thing, but you tell me how you were sitting down talking to Lester Young, and he would tell you different things, show you different things. And that's what's so important. That's why bringing people in and find someone in your neighborhood who played knows this language. They don't have to be famous. They just have to know the language. If somebody can say, hello, how you doing, in the jazz language, they can help your program. Yeah. Also, don't be afraid to start. If an old clarinet player like me has never had any formal jazz training can do it, anybody can do it. But I've always realized that the only way I can get better is bringing in people like Dizzy Gillespie to work in my high school band and do clinics with my high school band. I mean, so those it makes a difference. And all the schools that I've worked with, all the schools in Seattle, the Roosevelts, the Garfields, all those schools that have brought me in for the last 20, 25 years have taken the concept and they've made these concepts their own. And even hiring people like Steve Stem, and that's out in the boondocks outside of Madison, Wisconsin, Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, and hiring somebody like that. But I started mentoring him over 35 years ago at Birch Creek, Wisconsin. And having us work together, the Band Director Academy of New York, his band being a finalist at Century Ellington for over 22 times, winning there 5 or 6 times. And when I first started, there were 0 minorities in this program, 0. Now he has a few there, but I'm just saying, so it doesn't have to be, it's not based on a color or race or ethnic identification. It's based on culture. Yeah. And all my textbooks based it on approaching the music from the culture. And just so happens jazz is derived from the Afro-American community. It's Afro-American music. It's from the Afro-American culture. And it's very difficult for a lot of directors, because of whatever they've been ingrained in them, to accept that the Afro-American culture has such a profound influence on our great American art form, which is jazz.
Right. Well, I mean, again, I want to dig into this for all of you. I mean, the wisdom that has been shared here in the last umpteen minutes is basically, I mean, you have an opportunity, all you directors now. You're going back fresh. You can take all of these ideas,
Oh, yes.
widen the margin, and bring all those people in for your students, because doing is still better than reading, as Ron said. Ron, I've twisted your arm before, but maybe sometime in the future we can even dig deeper into this. Would that be okay?
Just give me a call, doctor.
You are the best. To all of you, thank you. Ron, thank you so much. This is great, man. I love you. No wonder your students feel about you the way they do. And for all of us, listen to this one several times. There's a lot in there. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time at Backstage. And in the meantime, let's strike up the band. Thanks so much. Thanks, Ron. Bye-bye.
Thank you.